Hi, I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Sherri.
Let us tell you a little bit about our podcast, Lemonade and Sunshine.
We're going to be talking to real people who have made lemonade with the lemons in their lives to help strengthen other people with their challenges.
We all need to know that there's hope and light even on our darkest days. And if you've ever felt alone in your struggles, and who hasn't, come and listen and sip lemonade in the sunshine with us.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Lemonade and Sunshine. We are stoked about this next episode, even though it doesn't sound like a thrilling topic, maybe. If you have anyone that you love that has food allergies, or you yourself have food allergies, not only is this episode going to have tons of great information in it, it could save someone's life. So take it on yourself if you don't want to listen. You might die. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. We don't have to add that. But
You might kill someone.
you might actually kill your best friend's baby children, even though you know that they have peanut allergies and, you know, you're like this big advocate. But you might take a cake over when somebody graduates and almost kill them. Hey, who would do that? Me. I did that. Even though
And then she was in tears.
oh
after.
my gosh.
There was no harm.
To my stomach.
They did not touch it.
Thank goodness. I mean, how many peanut butter sandwiches had you come over to my house to eat in private, and then I'd hose you down like hazmat so that you could go home? How many times did you come over to eat peanut butter at my house, and then I like waltz over there with a cake? Hey, happy graduation to one of your other kids. I'd like to kill your twin babies. What in the world? Seriously. Oh, good times. Anyway, we're going to talk to Kim today. So our very own Kim is going to tell us her adventures in the food allergy world.
Yeah.
And trust me, she has been through it. So I'm so excited that you're going to talk to us about this, because honestly, it is terrifying to me. And I have 5 children, and I'm always like, they wouldn't have made it. If that would have been they would not have made it. I don't know how you do this. The many, many times that they've been in the emergency room, and I mean, it's touch and go. I couldn't do it. And I know you're going to talk about PTSD of parents who have kids with food allergies. I mean, among many other things that you're going to talk about. So we could just get into it now.
Yes. And also for those who don't have food allergies or don't have children with food allergies or family members, I mean, I feel like everybody knows somebody with food allergies, right? How you can be supportive and help people. I mean, that's one of the big things. And that, I think, is how we can save lives. And I think it's all about education with food allergies. But I just want to give a disclaimer. I am not a doctor.
Nor does she play one on TV.
Yes, I don't play one on TV. This is just from my personal experiences. And even things that I share that maybe a doctor told me or whatever, you need to get an allergist for yourself or your child if you have food allergies and listen to what they say. Every case is different. And so this is just information I'm sharing from my own experiences.
Yeah. And the severity of the allergies is different. And I know you're going to talk about that too, but that is what is amazing to me is people think, oh, well, I know somebody that has this, but they don't have it to the extent as someone else.
Yeah.
So you can't put it in a nice little box and say everybody this or that.
Yeah. Well, and so much information has changed over the years. I mean, what doctors were telling me, my boys were 17 months when we discovered, and now they're 18. And so a lot of information, I feel like, has changed with food allergies, but then also not. So anyway.
Can you tell us, like, so your boys were adopted to you and it was like the most awesome situation. That is a cool story in itself. And like, how did you find out that they had food allergies? I mean, they're tiny babies. And then what happened? I don't
Well,
remember.
so my mom's best friend has a grandson that had a peanut allergy. And I was like, oh, I could never do that. I love peanut butter so much. I eat it out of the jar. I could never do that. Well,
At neighbors' houses, she eats it. Yes, she sure did.
yeah. And so, yeah, so we had decided that we would not give peanut butter to our kids until they were 2, because that's the safe thing to do. And
Mhm.
where they were adopted, we didn't know what the family history was and if there were food allergies. And there were food allergies in the birth family. And so we decided we would wait until 2. But how we discovered it was that I was making cookies for our oldest son, and he was serving a mission for our church. And so I was making those peanut butter cookies with the Hershey Kiss in the middle, and I was going to send those out to him. And the twins were napping, and one of them woke up. It was Joseph. So I was holding him on the counter, and he had gotten some batter on his finger. And so before I was able to get a paper towel and wipe it off, he touched his face, and then I wiped it off his face. Well, his whole face swelled up. Like his eye was swelled shut, and his whole face swelled up. And so I called the pediatrician's office and told them what had happened. And the girl that answered, and the doctor was later really mad about this, just said, oh, just give them Benadryl. And I'm like, okay, well, he's 17 months old. Like, do I still give him Benadryl? I thought, yeah, that's what they say you should do. So just give him Benadryl. Well, do I need to take him in? No, he'll be fine. Like, okay.
Mm.
And so the doctor, when I told him that later, he was like, wait, what?
Jeez.
Um,
That's terrifying.
yeah. And so anyway, I figured, having heard about my mom's friend's grandson who had this experience and knowing about that, I was like, okay, we need to see an allergist. So I made an appointment.
Hold up, Kim. So did you give him Benadryl?
I did give him Benadryl. Yeah, I did.
And he was fine.
No. So it didn't go away. I would say his face was swelled up for like 36 hours. I mean, it went down and everything, but he didn't look like himself for a good 2 days, which is crazy,
Okay.
right? And I think I called back, but I did make an appointment with an allergy doctor. I mean, he was okay, but he might not have been. I mean, you're just kind of winging it as a parent, right? You don't know what.
Oh, for sure. At that point, especially when you didn't have any prior experience for that. Yeah.
Yeah. But looking back, you're right. When it didn't go away right away, I should have taken him in. But I just didn't know the severity of it.
Right. Yeah.
So made an appointment with the allergy doctor, and they tested them for both boys, because they're identical twins, for a whole host of things. And he said he would let me know when we got the results, because he did a blood test. I don't think he did a skin test. I think he just did the blood test. So I get, like, maybe a week later in the mail, I got this piece of paper, multiple pieces of paper actually, with all of their food allergies and a little note from the doctor that says, stay away from everything 1.0 or higher.
Okay.
And it was everything. Potatoes, rice. It was stuff they were eating. Like, it was stuff that they had been eating and were fine to eat. And I didn't know at that time that with food allergies, there are a lot of false positives. And I didn't know that at the time. So I'm looking at this going, what am I supposed to feed them? I mean, it was like fruits and vegetables. It was legumes. It was all the starches, potatoes, rice, pasta, like wheat, it was everything you can name something. And it was on the list and it was higher than a 1.0. And so I was really freaked out and upset. And so I called the doctor's office and I went in to see the doctor probably that same day. And I was crying and I was like, what am I supposed to feed them? And he goes, okay, if they're eating it and they're okay to eat it, just keep giving it to them. I am going to call this doctor I know that's up north. We were living in St. George at the time. This doctor that I know up north and see if he can get you in and see you. So he did. We ended up going to that doctor who spent 3 hours with us and he blood tested them and skin tested them, which any doctor that doesn't do both, I mean, you really need to do both.
Okay.
Because it's what that tells you together. Because the skin test is how your body is reacting to the allergy. And there's a lot of false positives with the blood test, but it's also good to have an amount that you're allergic to. So together, I feel like, at least in my experience, that's kind of what tells you how serious the allergy is, along with how they react to it. So you can have like a low blood number, but if you react really strongly to it, then that's a severe reaction. You can have an anaphylactic reaction, even if your blood number is not that high. It took me a long time to figure all this out. But anyway, so he spent 3 hours with us. I mean, he had TVs. My boys, their backs were covered. They're swollen everywhere because of all their allergies and everything.
And they were 18 months at this point?
Yeah. Yeah. So actually before that appointment, we had flown back east to visit family. And during that time is when we discovered their asthma as well. So, I mean, like, first of all, traveling with them, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's going to be peanuts on the plane. So I had to call the airlines and like, they could die, so can we not have peanuts on the plane? You can't control like if people bring peanuts on the plane.
No, you sure can't.
And clearly,
enclosed area like that.
Yeah. And clearly they were allergic to the touch because Joseph had just touched the peanut butter and his whole face swelled up, So anyway, then we're in Montreal and they were having their first asthmatic reaction and it was horrible. They were laboring to breathe and it was so scary. And oftentimes too, I learned that so food allergies or just allergies in general, eczema, which they had, and asthma kind of all go hand in hand. That's why there's a lot of doctors that specialize in food allergies and asthma, because if you have one, you're likely going to have the other. Not necessarily food allergies, but allergies in general. So after that appointment with that doctor up north that we went to see, we discovered at the time they had allergies to peanuts, tree nuts, eggs, which they have later outgrown, lots of legumes, which I don't remember if we discovered that at the time or later, but they're allergic to like peas, lentils, chickpeas, all kinds of different legumes. So also he said if they're not reacting negatively to it, that it's okay for them to eat it. So that whittled the list down of all of their food allergies a lot. And so I would recommend, from my horrible experience with the first doctor, that you ask people who is a good doctor and do your research and go see a good doctor, because that experience I had with the first doctor was not a good one. But we have had amazing doctors for our boys since then, amazing allergy doctors that have been very helpful. So if you live in Utah, I have recommendations for you.
So Kim, obviously it all sounds hard to me, but what were some of the biggest challenges or lemons when you first started to discover that the boys had these issues? I suppose anywhere you went was scary.
Yeah, I would say just not feeling safe anywhere. I mean, we were at church and Sherri, as you know, Sherri was so good and supportive. Our church happened to be around lunchtime. So we had those chairs that had the circle in the middle where it's open. And so the twins are
Mhm.
standing there, and right behind them were kids eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches,
Yeah, I
touching the
remember.
same chairs that the twins are.
Ay,
And
yeah,
Sherri came over and was like, they're eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, like just whispered that. And I remember we whisked the twins away, and I went home from church with them and cried because I felt like, okay, we're not even safe at church. Like,
right,
we're not safe anywhere, And so that was really hard because, I mean, they could die from this.
right,
And
right.
so
It's not like, oh, they're going to get sick or they'll get a rash. It's like, no, they'll stop breathing, their throat will close off, and that'll be
then
it.
they could die. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my husband was on a whole peanut kick at that point in time. So he was eating like peanuts in the shells. Why? I don't know. He's on sunflower seeds now. Years later, we're all on sunflower seeds. But then it was peanuts in the shells. And, he works construction. He's just like eating peanuts in his truck and blah, blah, blah. We live right next door to them. I was freaking out then. I was like, what if the boys come over and there's peanuts? Because they were busy boys as they got older. They were busy and everywhere. And what one didn't think of, the other one did. They helped each other out. They were everywhere. I was just like, oh my gosh, we're going to
And they loved John. They were always like, hey, John.
Oh
Like, they
my
wanted to
gosh.
know what.
Yes. I'm like, no, stay away from him. He could kill you accidentally. Oh my gosh. Okay, go ahead. It's given me PTSD to think back about it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it freaks me out.
Yeah, it was scary.
right.
So then the other thing that happened was, I mean, they were still in what we call the nursery, and where the kids play and they have a little lesson and everything. And so I was in there with them and found a Nutter Butter wrapper in the trash. Well, I mean, like Sherri said, my boys are busy. So I think one of them might have even pulled it out of the trash and brought it to me. I don't know, but it really scared me. And so I asked one of the leaders if it would be okay if they posted a sign that said, please no nuts. I also spoke to our bishop, who is over our congregation, and asked if he could announce over the pulpit not to have nuts. And so that was helpful. I remember people being very supportive at that time. And so that helped me to feel safer being at church, knowing that, I mean, of course, there are people that visit and people from other congregations that use the same building. And so you have to be super vigilant, especially when they're little like that, because they don't understand, and they could just take
Right.
something and touch it, put it in their mouth, whatever. So
Kids put everything in their mouth. Babies put everything in their mouth.
yeah,
Everything. Rocks, everything.
yeah, yeah. And like going to the grocery store, for example, I had them in a cart where it's like a car when I'm pushing them. So I push them really fast through the aisle where the checkout is, because, they have candy on both sides there. So I pushed them through really fast. I got to the car and one of them had a package of Rolos, and he had already eaten half of it by the time we got to the car. And okay, lucky that wasn't nuts, because if it was nuts, he could be dead,
Right.
And so that made me like, okay. And I think after that incident, I did not leave the house alone with them until they were 3. Like, they were 2 at that time. And it was scary to take them out by myself, because there were 2 of them and they had 4 little hands that could grab something. And
they would go different direction.
Yeah,
I remember.
They did.
You'd take off after one and the other one was going the other way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But one thing I did at Halloween, I delivered bags of nut-free candy to about 10 to 12 homes, just in a brown paper bag. I would deliver that, and then we would go trick-or-treating the night before Halloween, just to those homes. And they would get their nut-free candy, because, when they're little like that, they'll just open the candy and eat it right away. So it was a lot scarier back then. And so we did that for 3 years, from ages 2 to 4. And then by the time they were 4, they're like, how come there's no other kids? So they wouldn't see all the kids trick-or-treating Halloween. We would like take them out to eat or do something special with. So that way they still got to go trick-or-treating and they didn't know what they were missing until they were 4 and they realized there were no other kids but them.
Then they were on to you. What the heck?
But by that time, then when they were 5, they were old enough to where they could listen. And then we would go through all the candy. We'd hold on to their candy baskets. They would put everything in there. And then when we got home, we dump it out and we get rid of all the candy with nuts in it. And so that was our way.
And Kim, I'm just wondering, like, how did you tell them when they did get old enough to be kind of responsible a little bit? How do you tell them, like, you can't eat this or you could die? You can't do that to a kid. I mean, that's probably what I would have done because I would have been so freaked out and so worried, over worrying. How did you explain that to them about, okay, you can't eat this? What'd you say?
So, I mean, as teenagers, you can say you can't eat this or you're going to die because they think they're not going to die. And the biggest fatalities are teenage boys because nothing's happened to them. But as toddlers, you're right. I mean, unfortunately, they had experiences. And also, fortunately, the first time you have an allergic reaction to something, it is not going to be as bad. It gets progressively worse. The more you're exposed to your allergy, the worse the reaction is going to be. So luckily, the first few reactions they had were mild and they kind of learned what that felt like. And so
scary.
I would just tell them you're going to get really sick because they would throw up as part of their anaphylactic reaction. That was how their bodies responded to it. In the beginning, like they would get red around their mouths. They used to say, "Mama, my neck feels funny," but it was really their throat. But that was just how they would describe it to me. So we had too many close calls. One time there was candy in somebody's diaper bag that they found and ate, and there was peanuts in it. That was the first reaction. Another time we had another little boy with us and we were at Costco and he was 2 and he was having a tantrum. So this old lady gave him a piece of candy and I also had my baby girl there who was like just a few months old. And I didn't notice this woman had also given the twins candy and it just so happened there were nuts in the candy that Joshua got. And so then he starts telling me he doesn't feel good and everything. And I'm like, okay, I didn't know what was in the candy. I was in the car at this point, stopped the car. He threw up all over the car, you know, like.
Yeah, no big deal. Just 4 kids in a car. You're headed straight to the emergency room. No big deal. Just like any given Monday, whatever. You know, go to Costco. I don't like to go to Costco in the first place, but I can't even imagine.
Well, and the funny thing about that was, so my daughter was finally old enough. So she was born in February. I think it was like April or something. So she was finally past the RSV season. And so that was my first outing with 4 kids with me. And I had the twins each holding on to the cart. And I had her in her baby car seat. And then the toddler.
You had it all together. You had it all together.
Yeah. I was so proud of myself. And then that happened.
I do 4 kids. Some nice lady.
Yeah. We ended up in.
Thank you, lady.
With that. Yeah. She was very nice and trying to help, but maybe ask parents before you give kids candy. So that's one way you could save a life. But yeah, and so we ended up in the ER and that was really scary. So each experience we learned from them and we learned different things. And that's really all you can do. So what we learned from that one was about secondary reactions, because then they were okay after we left the hospital. We get home and Josh started having a major asthma attack and he was having a secondary reaction. I didn't know what that was at that point, but that's what it was. And that's when Bruno was out of town and John came over and gave him a blessing. We believe in blessing our children through our priesthood. And
that's my husband. My husband did that.
He did. And he was so good.
Had nothing to do with him, had everything to do with our Father in heaven.
Yeah.
But Yeah. So I was going to ask you secondary. That was the first time there was a secondary reaction. Is that right?
Yeah.
Uh, and you didn't even know about that until then?
No,
Like
I
you hadn't
didn't.
even.
Yeah. And the way it manifested for him was with asthma. He started having a severe asthma attack and was having difficulty breathing, which is a secondary anaphylactic reaction, So I probably should have given him an EpiPen at that point. I'm pretty sure I called the doctor and they told me it was a secondary reaction, and that's how I knew.
And that was so scary because we lived outside of town quite a ways. So it would have been half hour for you to get him to the hospital,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, so scary. So you learned that. So you're saying every single time you'd learned a little bit and a little bit and a little bit.
Yeah. You learn really fast. You always want to have EpiPens with you. If they have asthma, also inhalers. You have to have those at all times. I had a little insulated bag that we kept EpiPens, Benadryl. We still have it actually. And they're albuterol inhalers. So we always carry that with us.
Kim, do the boys have that now themselves? Because they're older. Do they carry that?
Yes.
If they're driving the car?
Yeah.
They have that?
Yes, they bring it to school and they should always have that on them. But, sometimes they don't.
Right.
But the next time, because I wrote notes about different experiences where I learned things, there was a Valentine's Day, second grade. At that time, we were living in New Hampshire, and they were really good back there about having nut-free lunch tables. They had 3 school nurses that were there all the time, and we were friends because yeah. So if your child had a severe nut allergy, they had nut-free classrooms. My boys were both in nut-free classrooms. So Valentine's Day class party, they both came home with candy. Bruno and I were going out that night somewhere. And so we just took the candy and put it in a cabinet above the refrigerator, high where they couldn't get to it. We should have known better about that. So the next morning, I woke up to Joseph saying, "Mama, I am having a reaction." He had crawled up there and had a piece of candy. So there were 4 fails there. We failed because we didn't go through the candy right away and get rid of all the candy with nuts in it. And we assumed that there wouldn't be nuts, which a lot of times that's what you learn. Like, you can't assume anything. Always have to be on guard. And just when you take your guard down and you think it's safe, that's when something happens. And it was almost like a reminder for us, okay, we need to be vigilant. We've loosened up on things. And so we failed. Joseph failed because he should have asked or not done that. But I mean, kids do stuff. But so he failed, we failed. The teacher could have gone through and made sure that there was nut candy in the nut-free classroom, or checked the students who have allergies, their candy.
Sure.
But, I don't blame the teacher because we didn't go through it either. So,
Right. And it's your kid, right?
Yeah. And then the parent that sent in candy with nuts in it to a nut-free class, which I also don't have any, like, that happens, it's an accident. They probably just weren't thinking about it because it's not their kid. So it's not really on their mind, And so people forget. So you can't be mad at people when they make mistakes, because if it's not their life and they're not living this, then it's not going to be right on the top of their mind. And that's something that I've learned too, is that unless it's you and your child, it's not maybe right at the front of your mind like it is mine.
Well, that's why it was so crazy for me when I did make that cake for the graduation party, because I knew you were my best friend. I heard it all the time. I helped you at church. I think I made the nut-free pictures that we put in the church. I knew. And then I waltz over there with this cake, and Bruno stops me at the door and is like, "Does that have nuts in it?" Yes, it does, actually. Bye. I knew when I did that. That is so terrifying to me. That was really glaring to me, that I knew all of this. I feel like I was in it with you, and then I did that. It's just so scary.
Well, and
So
you
scary.
weren't the only one. You have to give yourself grace, I think, as a parent, because you're going to make mistakes, and the people around you, because it takes time to get used to it for everybody. And we made mistakes too along the way. And there were many other people that made mistakes. And it's okay, I mean, unless it's not okay, unless they tell.
Right?
But
I mean, it is okay because it was okay, but it could have really not been okay.
yeah, some other things that we learned from some of their anaphylactic reactions. One was we were at a restaurant that we normally eat at. I was distracted at the time, and they were ordering. Usually, if they were ordering something new, they would ask if it had nuts in it. But they were ordering chicken salad, and they didn't think there would be nuts in chicken salad. They thought it would be fine. So they didn't ask, and I was distracted, so I didn't ask. I assumed they were eating something that they normally ate that was fine. So they got chicken salad, and they had an anaphylactic reaction, both of them, because there were pecans in the chicken salad. So just from that experience, you have to be hypervigilant. And then the worst reaction that they had was from a neighbor that they were mowing their lawn. They were doing some landscaping and things like that. This was when they were older. I think they were 16 or 15 at the time. And she had gotten them cookies from a place, which was super nice of her. She was being thoughtful. Well, they had had cookies from this place before. I had gotten them. I had asked the people that worked there to use a separate spatula to make sure, or like only gotten cookies when I knew that they weren't making cookies with peanut butter, nuts or whatever. So they had had the cookies before, chocolate chip cookies. Well, this time they were peanut butter chocolate chip because this woman didn't know that they had a peanut allergy. And so one of the boys had a bite of it, and it was the worst reaction that either one of them have ever had. He called me. Luckily, my phone was on because sometimes the volume isn't on on my phone. And it just so happened that their birthday was in 2 weeks, and we were getting them phones for their birthday. They did not have phones before that. And Bruno just randomly said, let's give them their phones now. And it was before their birthday. And I was like, well, why aren't we just going to wait for their birthday, for their present? And he just felt really like he wanted to give them their phones early for some random reason. Well, luckily they had phones so they could call me when that experience happened. Luckily my phone was on. I went right away. It was just around the corner, and they didn't have EpiPens with them. And the thing about EpiPens is the sooner that you administer the EpiPen, the greater chance that you can save the person from having a fatal reaction. There was a story that a friend of mine shared with me when my kids were younger about a boy that was in his early 20s that had a peanut allergy. And also the thing with peanut allergies is it is the most dangerous food allergy because a very small amount can cause a very severe reaction. And this is what I've been told from allergy doctors. So with this story that this woman shared with me, there was a boy in his early 20s, and he had had some candy that had a label on it that I can't remember if it was manufactured in a facility with nuts or may contain nuts or made on shared equipment with nuts, but it was something like that. And he had had some and he was fine. And then the next day he had more, he was fine. So the day after that, he took the candy from like his mom's house and he was driving to his dad's house. He got to his dad's house and he was in full blown anaphylactic shock. The dad administered the EpiPen right away and the boy died. This young 20 or 21-year-old boy died. And so that told me, okay, so the sooner you administer the EpiPen, the safer, the more likely you can save a person.
Does that mean that the allergy was in there and it had built up to a point where it became dangerous, or what the heck? Because I mean, if they have something once and they're fine, why wouldn't you have it again and think you were going to be fine? So did it build up in his system and then all of a sudden it was this huge allergy? Or maybe it was on shared equipment and that particular piece of candy had more nut particles, dust, whatever on it?
Yeah. And the truth is, I think it could be either way because Joshua did food trials and he did food trials with almonds. And with those food trials, you have to get the blood allergy numbers down low below a certain point before you can even do it. Because people just say, oh, if you just give them whatever they're allergic to, people say that they'll outgrow it or they'll be okay.
Mhm.
Well, no, that's not really how it works. If your numbers are too high, you can't even do the food trial. So we had to wait until they were below a certain point. Joseph's have never been below a certain point, so he can't do any food trials. So Josh did it with almonds, and he can still eat almonds, which is great for him. He did it with pistachios, and he did fine. And then he kept eating pistachios, and one day he had an anaphylactic reaction with pistachios. We ended up in the ER.
Word.
And it could be because he had taken a break from eating it and then ate it again. But I mean, there's so many unknowns.
Variables. Yeah, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to touch on the fact that you said that people need to realize, because some people will say to you, look, I know a person who has a nut allergy, but they do fine with yada, yada, or it's not that bad. You know, people will tell you, well, it's okay, they're allergic, but it's not that bad. But there are varying degrees and people have different, and that's the numbers that you're talking about, but they have different degrees of the allergy. And then all bets are off because you can have something 3 times and be fine. And then the 4th time, you're not fine.
Yeah. Because the allergy gets progressively worse or it gets better. I don't know. I mean, there's so many unknowns with it. And I think that's why it has to be a case by case basis. And that's why,
right,
to help people who have food allergies and to help the parents of children with food allergies, just listen to them, listen to the parents, listen to the kids. When they say, I can't do this, believe them.
Right.
Just because your friend Susie can eat that and has a peanut allergy, well, that doesn't mean that someone else can.
So, Kim, what is it like to be a parent of somebody that's taking their kid to the emergency room for this kind of a situation? What is that like for you?
It's terrifying, but in the moment, you are focusing on your child and you have to keep a pulse on how they're doing. If it's getting worse, are they breathing? So many times driving to the hospital saying, okay, can you breathe? How's your throat? Do you feel like your throat's closing off? You know, and so you're so hyper focused on them and what's going on with them. And also not trying to scare them and trying to make them feel comfortable and
calm.
Yeah. So you're holding it together as best you can and trying to be strong for them. And it is a hard challenge for them. Once you're at the hospital, you're still focused on them and what the doctors are saying and everything. But I would always, once I got home from the hospital, that's when I would unravel.
Sure. When you realize like this could have been so bad.
Yes, because you're trying to put it together and you're keeping it all in. And then you just want to cry. You want to go in your room and just cry because you're on fight or flight.
Yeah. Cortisol is.
Yes. Yes. You don't know.
And this is where the PTSD comes in, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I've read that parents of children with food allergies experience symptoms similar to PTSD. And I 100% believe that because I think that's a great way to explain the feelings that I have felt or it's happened. I always explained it like my nerves are shot. I just felt like shaky. I felt upset. I wanted to cry. And just you're terrified of losing your child and you're just trying to keep him alive, you know?
Right. Yeah, I can't even, I literally can't even imagine. What has anybody said or done that has been not great or that is not helpful? Can you go there with us?
Yeah, so I put down 3 things that people can say or do or assume that can make it more difficult. We talked about one, that assuming that if you know somebody with a food allergy, that they're okay with something, then everybody's okay with it. That's not true. Case by case basis. Or that you just need to give whatever the allergy is to the kids and they'll be fine. They'll get over it. And that's not either. But I think the worst, they're all not good, but that I'm overreacting. That just dismiss me as a parent or as a person with food allergies, that you think the person is just overreacting. They're going to be fine because so-and-so that I know is fine with that. And so this experience happened to us. We were at a baseball game and I did not know this was going on. I had already explained to the coach about the peanut allergies and everything, the nut allergies, and my concern because they bring snacks to the games and everything else.
Take me out to the ballpark. Take me out. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. Hello? Yeah, peanuts. Yikes.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, buy me some bullets and what?
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, and so
I digress.
If I needed to bring substitutions, I would for the snacks after the game or whatever, but I just wanted to let him know. Well, so apparently at this one game, they were eating peanuts. The coach, the assistant coach, and the kids, the coach's son and some of the other kids were eating peanuts. And, maybe they forgot or whatever, right? So I didn't know this was going on. And Josh was like, you guys can't eat those because I'm going to get sick. You can't have those. I'm allergic. And they just kind of ignored him and kept doing it. And so my thought on that, besides my mom rage that I had after realizing this, was obviously they don't want to hurt my child. They just don't understand. And that's why I think education with food allergies is so important. And that's why I wanted to do this episode, because a lot of people don't understand. And so as a result of that, because of the peanut dust and everything, Joshua ended up having a severe asthmatic reaction because he was breathing in all the dust and because he was holding the bat with the peanuts. And so we ended up in the ER that night, all night long. And that was our night. And so don't discount what people are saying because you think it's going to be fine.
Yeah. And if it's a kid who's telling you that and you're like, oh, well, he doesn't know. You're going to be, just don't be so dramatic. You'll be fine. No.
Yeah. Because they know, because they've experienced it before. So I would just listen to what parents and kids or anybody with food allergies says.
Don't take that chance.
Yeah, they're not trying to inconvenience people. I mean, if anything, you don't want to inconvenience people. I'm one of those people. I hate inconveniencing people, but I have to keep my kids alive.
And I know that you had some cool experiences with people for Scout Camp, because I remember lecturing Scout leaders and stuff when they took my boys. And I said, look, you come back with my kid all in one piece. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with me and you won't like it. You will not like having to deal with me if anything happens to my kid on this Scout Camp. Not that I was a helicopter parent at all, but I used to freak out about them going, and I didn't have kids that could literally die from a Snickers, So tell us about that, Scout leader.
So yeah, going on their first Scout trip, as a mom, I had to prepare for the worst possible scenario. So in my mind, I thought, okay, they're in a remote location. They're on a hike somewhere in the middle of nowhere. They're far in the hike to where it's not going to be quick to get out. They're hungry. A friend has a snack and says, no, there's no nuts in it, but there is. They eat it. They go in full blown anaphylactic shock. They forgot their EpiPen and they die. That's like the worst case scenario. And then I had to prepare for that. So how I prepared for that, okay, you have EpiPens. You can keep these at camp. These are your bags you have to take with you in your traveling backpack. So you have these EpiPens here. Just anticipate, have snacks for them. And then also the leader, he said no nuts. Well, sometimes, as you know from the classroom experience, nuts happen, but I was grateful that he put it out there to the parents in an email saying not to bring any nuts on the trip to keep the boys safe. And the other thing he did, he came and had a meeting with us about the food, and he brought the food labels for all the items. He had printed off everything that was in there and sat down and went through the menu with me and Bruno. I was so grateful for that, because that helped me to have so much more peace of mind about them being there, because I knew that he was looking out for them and that I had control over the menu as far as what my boys ate. And then, there were some items that maybe had some cross-contamination. So I baked some things for them that were substitutions. And I think as a parent with children with food allergies, you have to be willing to offer that. Like, I can cook the food for the event, or I can
So they're not missing out.
Yes, I'd be willing to buy the food. I would be willing to cook the food just to keep my kids safe. But when he came and I didn't have to cook the food or buy the food, and he had done all that work, I was so grateful. And there was another experience when they went on trek and they were going to the middle of nowhere, Wyoming, there were no hospitals around. They did have some medics there. That was really scary. And Bruno was going to be on that. And so that was a little more peace of mind too. But I honestly was trying to get the menu and find out what was going on with the menu. And I was thinking, I don't know if they're going to be able to even go, because it was just so scary. Well, this woman who was helping with the food, she had food allergies. And so what she did was she made this huge spreadsheet and she put every single item on there and all the ingredients of every single item for every meal. It was pages.
Wow.
And it was so much work. And I opened that up to see what the meal was. And I was not expecting that. And I just burst into tears. And they were able to go on that trek, which was a wonderful experience for them because of the extra efforts of this woman. And for her to do that for the few children that have food allergies that were going on that trip. I mean, it might seem like something not a big deal. It was huge. They were able to go because she did that, and made it safe.
Right.
And everything was safe. But yeah, I mean, that was huge.
Right. So I'm wondering, since this podcast is about the lemonade that we make out of the lemons, but where is the sunshine in this? Like, what has been the sunshine for you in this? Because this is a serious, I don't want to say trial, but kind of is,
Well,
it's been a hard thing.
I think you have to trust God. I mean, I've seen his hand and how he has helped us in this and delivered us in many ways from this, like the experience with the phones.
Right. I was just going to say.
Yeah, I could go through every anaphylactic reaction that they've had, and I can name ways that he's been there in the details. Also, you feel the love of other people and their concern, like you when they were first diagnosed. I used to cry to you, and you were so caring and helpful, and John and so many people, their youth leaders who have been so supportive to the point where I've been in tears out of gratitude for them. And so that has been sunshine. I've been touched so much by how other people have been over backwards to accommodate us, because it's hard to let other people serve you. And it's hard because you feel like you're inconveniencing people. And so when people go that extra mile and do something like that for you, it means so, so much. So any efforts anyone makes, even just trying to understand and not be dismissive when you mention your needs with the food allergy. But some other blessings, I think my boys and I have grown closer because of this challenge. I know every time we've gone to the emergency room, they have been able to feel how much I love them. I know that. And it's made us closer. And I think it's also helped them to grow closer to God, as most of our challenges do. And I think if we can learn to lean on Him and rely on Him for our comfort and peace, then I think we can see Him in the details and feel Him with us during those hard times. And really, as a parent of a child with food allergies, you have to trust to a certain extent. When you're sending your child off and you don't know, you can't control it as they get older.
Right.
You can control the environment when they're younger, but as they get older, you can't. And so God is your best friend.
You have to just let go, let God. Like my mom used to always say, that was her famous motto, let go, let God. And we all have to do that to a certain extent with our kids. We have to just trust that He's got them. But seriously, I mean, you really, really have had to exercise that. And it's helped your faith grow, I'm sure, leaps and bounds. And then every time that they're okay. And I mean, I asked you once how many times you've been to the ER with them, and you don't even know, do you?
No,
so many.
I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
I think you do all that you can, and then you have to give it to God. But also, I would say to anybody that has recently just found out that their child has food allergies, don't be hard on yourself. You will make mistakes, and it's okay. Just learn from them. It's hard. It's overwhelming, but it will get easier. You get used to it. You do learn to live with it. You never get used to the ER trip, but you're not alone. And it's so much easier now because with social media and everything, there's so many support groups and other people talking about it. And so you don't feel as alone. There's a lot more resources and ways you can learn and recipes you can find and things like that, which is very helpful.
Will you have some of those resources that you could list for us, Kim? Will that be something that we can link, that somebody that's listening could find those resources?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. That'd be awesome. I feel like I need a full body massage after this. I don't know about you. I am stressed. This all is coming back to me. This is your day to day though. Like this is your everyday, and soon your boys will be out there in the big wide world, and you just have to go, okay, like you've taught them and they know that's it. You just have to let that go and let God have them and watch over them, as we know that He does, and how many blessings that you've had, and those will just continue, and you just have to go forward with that idea. But I, for one, need a massage now.
Yeah. And I'm just realizing you saying that, I'm like getting emotional. I'm having this emotional release, knowing that like we're through talking about this.
Yeah.
It's very traumatic.
Right. But honestly, if something that you said, if some experience that you had and some challenge that you've had with this helps one person, I mean, that is what we want to do in this podcast with whatever we're talking about. Like if we can reach someone that it might help, if you have possibly helped one person, then it's worth going down that road and kind of going through all of that again. So I am so grateful. I'm so grateful for you, and what an example you are of just like an awesome parent who just does absolutely everything she can. And I don't mean to bawl. This is not supposed to be a bawling podcast, but I just appreciate you so much and love you so much. And I think this will help somebody. And that is the point.
Thanks, Sherri. I just want to say that I tell my boys all the time that God gave them to me because he knew I would be a helicopter mom. And I totally feel justified in being a helicopter parent with food allergies. So anyway.
Yeah, I think you are. We want to thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you have tuned into this episode, it's pretty likely that you have some situation that relates to this. And I hope this will help you in your journey with food allergies. Thank you so much, Kim, for sharing all of your experiences and these kind of hard things with us. We appreciate it. And stay tuned for another great episode on Lemonade and Sunshine. Thanks for joining us today. We would love to hear from you.
Yes, we really would. So please give us your feedback.
And let us know if there's any topics you'd like us to cover.
And how you have found the sunshine with the lemons in your lives.
And how do they give us feedback, Kimberly?
You can find us, Lemonade and Sunshine, on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple iTunes. Please give us a review and rating. It really helps us as a new show.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely does. So until next time, we hope that you can feel the sunshine.
And we hope you will tune in next week to Lemonade and Sunshine.